to another episode of the Young Professionals podcast with Luke and Sarge. Sarge, who are we speaking with today?
Luke, today we're talking to Joumana Ghazzaoui. Joumana is a graduate at ANZ Bank in Sydney. Joumana studied a Bachelor of Economics at the University of Sydney, majoring in finance and economics. In her penultimate year, Joumana secured an internship at ANZ, which she managed to convert to a graduate role. Joumana began her graduate position in 2020, spending the first 4 weeks of this in the office with her new team before transitioning to working from home full-time. Joumana, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
So we might just jump straight into it. You're a graduate at ANZ. What's the graduate program like at ANZ? How is it structured?
So it goes for 18 months and you have 3 6-month rotations. The first one you're kind of placed in by default, and then the second and third you actually get to choose any team you like within your division.
So when you started, what team did you first rotate through?
So I actually started in the team that I did my summer internship in, which is called business banking. So that focuses on lending between $1 and $10 million to medium-sized enterprises. Awesome.
And what types of things are you considering when you're lending to these small and medium enterprises?
Given that they're a range of different businesses as well, so it wasn't focused on one industry, I wouldn't say it's a set kind of thing. It's, I guess, just having an understanding of different industries and having a look at how these different industries operate, what's important, what factors, and I guess what economic concepts are related to those specific types of industries. I think just having an understanding of general financial statements, is very important.
And for our listeners at home, what are those financial statements, assuming that no one knows anything about accounting or finance?
Okay, so we have 3 very important basic ones. The first one's a profit and loss, which I think is also called an income statement. Then the second is your balance sheet, and the third is your cash flow statement.
So that's a very good summary. So in that business lending team, what is your day-to-day, or what did your day-to-day role look like when you started?
Yeah, so what I took on the role was called an assistant manager role. So this type of role is very structured. Your day-to-day is, I guess, you start off looking at specific reports, and you work alongside a relationship manager who has a client base of around 40 businesses, or maybe plus or take a few. And so basically the day-to-day role involves checking your reports. So these are looking at your customer accounts, seeing if there's any fluctuations, noticing why there may be potential fluctuations. Then you have the customer service section of it. So this involves, I guess, customers come to you to ask for so many different things. There's never one particular thing. It might be that they want money to be transferred from one account to another. It might be that they have a transaction in their account that they don't know how it's come along and they want it to be traced. They might ask for you to, I guess, send checkbooks, different types of things. And there's not really one thing. It just depends on the client, what they want. And then the second part, I guess, the third part is the credit writing. So that's probably the large chunk of it. And that involves, I guess, determining how risky your client is based on a number of different factors. And I guess it's just about really understanding whether or not this person can service their loan.
What is a small to medium business? What kind of businesses are you lending to, or is your team lending to rather?
So a small to medium business is, I guess, I think it's a business that has possibly more than 50 employees around that. So it's not, it's larger than your coffee shop down the road. And I would say it's more so your pubs, restaurants. It is your construction companies. In terms of like fencing companies, we've had some really interesting shoe brands, some franchises. So that sort of stuff is what I would call small to medium enterprise.
Yeah, okay, cool. And I think that's important for people to hear. Leading into kind of my next question is, if you're talking lending to those kind of companies, particularly at the moment, that is quite a dynamic situation to be navigating based on the current, COVID pandemic and the like. What's it been like coming in as, a fresh grad, learning the ropes of kind of the nuts and bolts of what you would be doing normally, but then also dealing with such a changing environment? I imagine your managers and your, direct reports are kind of also learning what to do in a different environment as well. What's that been like?
Yeah, so I guess it was only just like you mentioned, 1 month, and then COVID hit and we all got sent to work from home. But not only was it that we were working from home, our entire work structure had changed too. So I guess COVID and relief packages became the chunk of our work. And yeah, at first it was very, I think, confronting, just having seen all of these business owners that were affected and everything was just turned upside down. And then I thought, well, how am I going to learn things? Like is it only going to be about COVID? All of that sort of stuff that I guess I was thinking about when it all happened. But I think if anything, it really taught me about the world. And I always think that I'm very lucky to have experienced this because I get to see firsthand how an economic crisis can affect a business.
We were talking about the different changes that you've had to deal with given for COVID, Joumana. Do you want to keep talking about the ways that you've had to, I guess, mold to the different way of working rather?
So just do you mean particularly working from home and how my work structure has changed?
Yeah, let's roll with that. Yeah.
So it's been really hard. I won't lie about that. And I actually don't enjoy it. I'm a very people person, so I like to be around other people. And I thrive off that human contact. And it's been really tough not having that at home and being at home in a new team or in a team that you haven't been in for quite some time and you're learning and you don't know much is actually pretty difficult because often you find that availabilities don't always align. Not everyone's there at your beck and call. And when that happens and you need to do a task and someone's not there for you, you just feel a sinking feeling of helplessness and you're like, what do? I don't know where to start. I'm not going to finish my task. That's how I did feel initially, but really that honestly really taught me to rely on myself and think outside the box, use the resources that I have and just really push myself because I think it's really important to understand that there's a very, very big difference between university and high school and working. When you're working, it's real time, it's real people, it's real people's money in the banking world. And so you just have to roll with things. There's no such thing as pressing pause and panicking. You just really have to roll with things. So, thankfully with time and practice, I've been able to do that. So,
yeah, I think also to add to that, I think there's a big part in realizing that, particularly in an environment like COVID, right? It's like you're not the only one that's going to be struggling with this. Even your managers and people that know what they're doing from a work perspective, they're also going through this change and trying to figure it out as well. And so are clients that you're working for. So you're definitely not in the boat by yourself trying to bail the water out. Like everyone's trying to figure it out at the same time.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And just on that, what sort of tips and tricks did you use, Joumana, to adapt to that environment of having to have a bit more independence and not being able to connect with your team as real time as you would have liked?
Yeah, so Although every day is different, there are some things that once you catch on and you know how to do, it opens the doors for knowing how to do other things. So when someone, I guess, teaches you how to do something, I think you got to put a really your concentration hat on and really focus and remember how to do it. And even if that involves like writing, I step by step things on my notepad and I put exact details in there so I don't forget one step. And then I put processes in my book so then I know how to do these things. But in saying that, I always said as well that I didn't want to have peripheral vision doing these things. I didn't want to learn how to do a task just because I needed to know that exact task. So I think also it was important for me to keep an open mind to learn about why I'm doing this task, what does that lead to, and the things around it as well is important, because you don't just want to be learning things for the sake of doing the task and then that's it, forgetting about it.
I love that answer because you spoke about how you like to do, like you have a certain way of like learning something and you want to write the process down and annotate that. And that's something that I definitely struggled with when I started working, because I'll be like, oh, maybe I need to adapt to other people's ways of doing things. And like after a little while you realize, oh, just because someone like goes about it that way, you don't have to do it that way. Like you can stick to your own process, provided you're getting to the right outcome and you're doing it in the right time frames.
Yeah, exactly. And just on that, I'm a firm believer not to be artificial in these sorts of environments. Don't, I think, you know, if you're not the type of person that writes things down. So for example, I'm not a diary person at all. I've never used a diary ever. I've tried to. I bought really pretty ones throughout my university. I bought some for work and I don't use diaries. It's just not my thing. And I can't, and I think like for a whole lot of time I was forcing myself to use this diary and do it that way. And I'm like, but I'm not even that kind of person. Like, so then I have my own ways of doing things. So whether it's my calendar at work or post-it notes or things like that, I don't wake up and then have a look through the diary and see this is what I've got to do. It's, for me, it's a to-do list. So I guess don't force things on yourself just because other people do them or you think that that's the right way to do things. So I guess it's very particular to yourself.
I think that's super important to understand that, you know, just because 5 people tell you this is the way that we do it, it's important to also realize that they probably do it that way because the person above them told them that that's the way that they do it, and that's just kind of all filtered down. I think it's important to really question that and be like, oh, what actually works better for me? Joumana, just bouncing back to the role in the business lending team, just for some, I guess, specific context for anyone thinking of getting into a graduate role at a bank or any kind of finance institution, can you just give us maybe 2 or 3 minutes about what, say, a credit assessment on a small to medium business that comes to you and says, hey, I want to borrow $5 million to go and start up a new restaurant or something like that. What does that assessment actually look like, and what are you doing as a grad in that team to help with that?
So I guess for every case is a little bit different, but the actual credit writing process is still fundamental. So from the relationship side, the client comes to you and requests lending. From, I guess, the onset, it's about looking at the risk. So that's the first and most important thing. So determining how risky this client is based on their financials and their. So to break it up a little bit more, when I say financials, I mean not only the 3 statements that we spoke about, but their debtors and creditors, their staff, their management, so all sorts of things that make up a business and how it runs. So we look at that sort of stuff.
And just to jump in there quickly, when we talk about risk from a bank perspective, for people who have no interest in finance, what is the risk? What's the major risk from the bank's perspective?
So the major risk, and it's very simple, it's that the client won't be able to service their loan. So we're looking at whether or not they have capacity to service their loan. So the risk is that they default, basically. And so we have to look at that. And it's not only so much the fact that they default. It's just more so about looking at whether this loan will put them in financial hardship, which is not what we want. So it's about determining whether or not they can service the loan. So once we look at the financials and we run the numbers and that sort of stuff, we bring and engage our credit team. So this is a different team in the bank who specifically work in credit. And they, again, do the same thing, but on their side. So they're the credit experts and they take a review and challenge kind of position. And they look at the financials and the risk and that sort of stuff from their side. And then we go through what we call workshops and kind of determine whether or not, again, they have capacity. So from a grad perspective, when you write credit, it basically, if you think of it, I like to think of it as a whole end-to-end process from the business. So what that will involve for me is looking at what the existing facilities they have, whether they have other facilities with us, whether this is a new facility. It'll involve, which is a key part, is research. So researching the business, researching the industry. And that's actually worked quite well for me as a grad, I think, because it's a refreshing and new perspective that I can potentially bring in. So often there were cases where there were businesses that I was like, oh yeah, I know that business. They're huge on Instagram. And so I was able to actually write a whole piece about what influencers they use from Instagram, how many followers they have, all of those sorts of things, where people that existing workers in the bank may not even consider. But like from my generation, I know that Instagram plays a massive part in business. So yeah, it's about like giving your own twist and your own, I guess, idea about the research and bringing that in. Then we have the financials. So that's the ugly, boring accounting type stuff. But I always say, even if you didn't do accounting, it doesn't matter. Profit and loss statements and balance sheets are pretty simple. I guess if you don't know anything about it, then maybe do a little bit of research. But yeah, it's just about looking at the numbers and just seeing fluctuations year on year. It's just about seeing like a massive shift and then trying to understand why. And this is where you're also able to talk to clients. So if you have, for example, your income has changed dramatically from last year to this year, then I was able to speak to the client, understand why. Like, tell me more about your business. What's changed? Have you changed anything? All that sort of stuff. And what else? A little bit more of that, and a bit about the management, the experience of management, industry experience. And and then that gets sent on to credit, and they review and challenge that. So that's pretty much the whole process. Yeah.
It sounds like a very thorough review of the business. Yes, it is. And it's very rewarding as well, especially when you get to speak to the business owners as well.
Joumana, you mentioned that if someone doesn't have a lot of accounting knowledge, that they can go to different resources to learn a little bit about an income statement and a balance sheet. What types of resources would you recommend a student consult?
Yeah, so for me, I always go to the internet. I think Khan Academy helped me throughout my whole university degree, and it definitely doesn't disappoint now as well. So Khan Academy, basic YouTube videos, and even asking other people in your team. No one's going to bite your head off if you don't know. And yeah, so just being honest about it and just asking questions and using the internet and that sort of stuff. You don't have to pull out any accounting textbook. That stuff is like pretty boring. As long as you know the simple stuff, everything else you learn on the job.
That's I think a really important point that we've been speaking to a few people about, and it's this kind of perception when you come into a grad role at any big company, be it a bank or any other kind of corporate. There's this view of, oh, I'm a grad, I don't know anything, and that's not a good thing. But in reality, everyone that's hired you has, one, hired you for a reason. You've got through that process because, you've obviously ticked whatever boxes that they're looking for. But two, you're now effectively a tool that people are using in that company to, at the end of the day, make money. So they are interested in you knowing this stuff and probably teaching it to you as well. So one bit of, real advice that I would, and I think a lot of people would give to grads, it's don't be afraid to ask those questions, not because, there's no such thing as stupid questions. And that is true, but also people who are working above you want you to upskill so you can service clients and eventually make money. So it's in everyone's interest that you say, hey, I don't know this. Can you help me get up to speed so then I can be an efficient member of the team?
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe jumping back a few steps, you did an internship at ANZ. What was the process for securing that like?
So ANZ's actually one of the very few places that doesn't require an academic transcript when applying. So it's definitely a place that looks at you. And by you, I mean other things other than your university degree. It's about your personality, your volunteering and what else, your work experience and that sort of stuff. So it was applying online without a CV even. I don't even think I remember having that. And just the first step was doing the logical reasoning tests. So I'm pretty sure every place has those. I always recommend to do lots and lots of practice. They're very strange questions. So yeah, definitely doing practice on those. And then after that, I did a phone interview and then a video interview, and then I secured that summer internship. So that went on for 2 or 3 months. And it was straight after that they offered me the grad role there, yeah.
And that was in the business lending team, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And then maybe going back even a little bit further, you studied economics. Why did you choose to study economics?
So for a number of reasons, I think it maybe started with my older sister. So she did economics throughout high school and uni. So I guess saw what she did and wanted to follow in those footsteps. For me, I've always had an ambition to work corporate. This was definitely fueled by my Miranda Priestley obsession from Devil Wears Prada. Even though she works in magazine editing, I was just obsessed with the idea of working in a corporate office and dressing up and wearing high heels and looking pretty and getting coffee. So yeah, I think I was obsessed with the lifestyle, and the economics part came after. But for me, economics has always been an interest. It's not so much a subject. I think it's a way of life or a way of thinking about the world. So it's a lot more than that. I put it as my first preference when I finished my HSC, which is my higher school certificate in Sydney. And I got that as my first option and I just went with it. Initially, in my first year, I actually hated it so much. I remember just telling my mum every day that I wanted to leave because it was nothing like what I thought it was, or it wasn't like high school economics. It was very hard, just weird statistics type stuff that I was learning. And I just said, what have I gotten myself into? I was really ready to change degrees. And then I just said to myself, no, like, you love economics, just wait it out, see how it goes, try and keep an open mind, and read a little bit more about it. Don't try and just think of it only about uni economics, like learn about the world and what economics is in the broader world, read the news, that sort of stuff. And I guess once I got into that, then I was like, okay, like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, I do like this. And yeah, that's how I stayed in my degree.
So with that, I think there are a lot of people that, for whatever reason are doing some subject at school and then end up doing a similar degree and might realize that, hey, I don't actually like this, but don't kind of take that second step to say, actually, where I'm only learning this stuff out of a textbook. I haven't really applied it in real life yet. It might be different. Where did that perspective come from? Like, have you always been someone that challenges the first level of thinking and wants to dive deeper and have a deeper understanding about what's actually going on?
Yeah, I think this comes down to the type of studier I was. Like, for me, I wasn't able to rote learn off a textbook even through high school and just if I didn't find it interesting or I didn't understand, then it was very hard for me to actually apply it. And then, just going in and having reading all these textbooks and seeing all these graphs, and it was so different to high school. And I was in that process when I was ready to leave. I just thought to myself, like, there has to be more to this than a textbook. And I just started reading, learning about the economy in other parts of the world, learning about historical economists as well is actually quite interesting. And I surprised myself. I thought that would be so boring, but then I tried to learn about that and economic principles and how I could apply them to my own life. One thing I think that I found super, super interesting was about a subject I did. It was called family economics, and it was actually applying economic principles to divorce, to how many kids parents decide to have, and so many things where I was like, how does economics even relate to this? But it does. So I think definitely I had to look deeper and find things that piqued my interest or that I could make connections to. And if I wasn't able to do that, then I would have really, really struggled.
I think that's a really great point, because I think at uni sometimes we get too caught up in learning about something and thinking about it only in the sphere that it's taught, rather than thinking about it in terms of what's the underlying principle here, or what can I take away from this, and how can I apply that more broadly, like outside of the way it's being taught.
Yeah.
I think so. That also works in reverse, right? Like I've got a personal example of, there was a commercial law subject early in uni, and for some context, I work in commercial law now and really like it, but I hated it at uni because it was taught in a really dry way, and nothing against the lecturers, but it just wasn't interesting. And then once I saw it in real life, I was like, oh, this is great. I've actually really enjoyed this. But I also had it in reverse. I was doing a kind of internship in IP law and loved it. But then I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'll do IP when it comes to uni. And I did the course at uni, and I really hated it. So I think it works both ways around. So it's important to have that perspective that just because you think one thing is either good or bad when you're studying it at high school or uni, it could be different in real life. So give it a crack and see what it's actually like.
Exactly.
I think that underscores the environmental factor too. Like if you're doing it with people you get along with, and you're in a team that you like, and the context of the subject matter is interesting, then that can make it interesting, as opposed to like if you're just purely in that academic area, then you're missing all those other factors too.
Oh, for sure. Joumana, while you're at uni, did you have any other involvement in co-curricular activities? And I'm talking, anything to do with university societies or traveling, anything like that has benefited you outside of, the direct academic skill set, but that you're applying in day-to-day role, in your day-to-day role at ANZ?
I think though I was probably, weirdly enough, I wasn't actually that involved in university because I had so many things out of high school that I kept up with. So, and in saying that, and I think it's important to make clear that just because you're not involved in university societies and that sort of stuff, there are still heaps of other things that you can actually do. So I'm actually a second Dan black belt in Taekwondo, and I have been doing Taekwondo for about 14 years now. And I am an instructor. So that always, people always ask me about that. So that I was able to draw connections with as a co-curricular activity, where I learned how to deal with other people and to teach little kids and that sort of stuff, which always continues to provide me with skills that I can use in real life.
With that, Joumana, just quickly on, I've been fascinated about kind of martial arts for a while, and the reason is that any time I hear someone talk about it that's been doing it for a long period of time, like yourself over a decade, they always talk about how it forces you to be consistently humbled all the time and basically get your ass kicked, and like you're not good,
Exactly.
you're not as good as you think you are.
Yeah.
Kind of go back to the drawing board. Like, what has that been something that has been important for your personal development?
Yeah, especially as I was younger, definitely that. And also martial arts is very centered around discipline. So that has played a major role as well. Just growing up, that's always taught me about respect. It's a very respectful sport, especially around the bowing, bowing to the flags, bowing to your instructors, bowing to those that are senior than you. So I think, that's definitely taught me and provided me with skills. My instructor always used to say a black belt's not just only about the belt you have around the waist. It's actually a lot more than that. And yeah, I think even though it's a violent sport per se, it's about, remaining calm in situations where you should be and not completely attacking someone, even though you really want to. So yeah, that's definitely helped me over the years when I just want to like let loose, but I've been able to remain calm from Taekwondo. So yeah, it's definitely taught me a lot of things.
I think that's fantastic. And a lot of people that are involved in, like I said, martial arts talk about that, but I think any sport in general, particularly team sport, is a good way to, not teach you how to work in a team, but to always remind you how important it is to be a team player, which
Exactly.
I think can be a little bit underrated by people that are coming into the corporate space. It's like you're coming into a big team, so you need to be working with people, not just for yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I was also going to say another curricular activities is I actually worked a lot throughout high school. Through uni. I worked at Bunnings for a long time, and I did a lot of different jobs in Bunnings, different from, customer service to pricing integrity to writing on the chalkboards. So many things that have taught me that I've been able to apply. In interviews, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar, but you always have to use the STAR method when answering questions, and that's about drawing from your own personal experiences and answering questions.
And what is the STAR method?
Okay, hopefully I remember it correctly, but I think it is situation.
I think that's the first one. We loosely know what it is, so we can you have a crack and we'll kind of guide you.
Situation, task, action,
and response. I think.
Yeah,
result.
Result.
I think result. I think result. Yeah. So in my interview for ANZ, I had to do that for an hour. I was being asked questions, and every single question that I had to answer was using that STAR method. So experience is key, and it doesn't matter what experience that is. It's just every experience is an opportunity. So I think that's really important. If university societies aren't your thing, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you don't have any extracurricular activities on your back. Like, it's fine. Find something that you love, and I think that's what's most important. Don't do anything because you think you have to, but obviously, experience is anything. It could be your job, it could be sports, it could be volunteering that you do, it could be absolutely anything.
I love that tagline, experience is key. I think that's super important.
Yeah.
You mentioned this, going back to the STAR method, you mentioned you did an hour of that at ANZ. What was that like? And how did you prepare to deal with those questions? Because they can, or from my experience, they can be a little bit organic, and it can be a little bit of a challenge at times working through those.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes even the questions that you get, you kind of think to yourself, I've never really had that experience. Like, for example, I remember one of the questions was, tell me a time where someone didn't agree with what you thought, or something like that. And then you had to refer to the STAR method. And that's difficult because often people I find aren't that in tune or aware of things when you're doing them. So when you're working, you don't think about, oh, I had this problem with someone and they were usually you're just annoyed, and then you don't really like care about it. You don't think about it in the STAR method. But preparation obviously is very important. I did a lot of research about potential questions they could ask me, and then I listed all my experiences on paper. So this was about the different jobs that I had with my Taekwondo teaching. I used to also volunteer tutoring students. Anything that I'd ever done in my life, I just threw them on a paper. Anything that I thought that I was relevant, I just wrote them down, and then I also put on the second half of the page all the potential questions. So problems, if I had a problem with a person or someone didn't agree with me or things like that, those difficult sorts of questions. And then I would try and make connections with each one. So I try and think of examples of where that might have happened. And look, and if it didn't happen, and obviously you can't, sometimes it's hard to make things up, and I wouldn't recommend lying anyway, but sometimes it's hard to think of an example, and that's okay. You might not always have an example for something, but yeah, even if it's the tiniest example, but you talk more about the task and how you overcame the situation and that sort of stuff, I think that's what's more important.
And on the topic of, these whole recruitment processes, and when you're in our interview and you're asked all those STAR-based questions, most of them are relatively the same. If you're going through one for ANZ or NAB or Australia Post or any of the big corporates, a lot of them have, take the same style of questioning. So with that, I think a good way or good method that, students can use to practice that is literally get other people in your friendship circle who are going to be applying for those things, and just put away, an afternoon on a Sunday, and one person be the moderator and ask those kinds of questions. And even if nothing else, you'll get other, 5 or 6 other people's responses to the same question, and that might spark something in your memory, be like, oh, I've actually done that, and I didn't think of that as an example that I could use.
Yeah, you'll definitely have a pool of questions that they could potentially ask. And I think like there's only so many questions they can ask before they run out of questions. So they'll all essentially be the same. But I think the hardest part in these situations is actually becoming aware of how you responded in a situation, or becoming aware of yourself, which is actually hard to do, especially in an interview. Because you don't want to say, I was super chill about it. I solved all the problems. I was great. No one likes doing that in an interview. And then you're also conscious that you want to say the right things. Like, did I respond the right way? Maybe I responded in a way that this company actually doesn't like. So, like there are so many thoughts that run through your mind, but I think practice with other people, talk to other people, become in tune with yourself, if that makes sense. Do your research.
I like it. And while we're on the topic of advice, what advice would you have for students who are currently in year 12 and they have to make a decision quite soon about what they do next year, whether that be take a gap year or maybe not take a gap year because they might not be able to get overseas. But if they're instead thinking about going to university, what would your advice be to them in terms of their decision making process?
Maybe a couple of things. I think one of the most important things is don't assume that what you learn in university or what you think about a role just by seeing other people do it or knowing about someone that has that job, don't assume that that's actually it. That's, I think, is very important. You find that so many people, I know you guys work in law, but I know so many people that want to work in law because, I don't know, they watched a couple of episodes of Suits and they think that that's what it's going to be like, or people that want to work in finance because they like stocks or they like to know about investing. So then they become like they work in finance. And I think making that assumption can be dangerous sometimes because you don't want to get there and then realize that it's not actually what you like, or you don't want to live this corporate lifestyle or something like that. So definitely, and I know it's hard, but you guys are obviously creating this podcast for a reason so people can actually realize this is what you actually do day to day. And look, and it's not all dressing up and going to the city and drinking coffee. Like it's actually hard. You work really hard. Sometimes you have late nights and it's not always fancy. So don't assume that something's going to be amazing without doing your research first. And then the flip side to that is also don't judge things either. So you might not like something and you might hate it and want to leave, but always give yourself that chance first, learn about it, learn more about it in a broader concept. So not just about university, and go from there, or speak to other people. You find that people love talking about themselves. So if you can find someone that's in the industry, they'd be happy to tell you all about it. But yeah, just don't be too swayed about the fancy stuff about these sort of things.
On that, Joumana, I think what you just mentioned there in terms of finding people that are working in those industries and actually talking to them is fantastic and super important. I'm a massive advocate for that. What are some practical tips that people can take on board if they're, halfway through a university degree or even in high school and saying, I want to learn more about, the graduate program at ANZ or finance more generally? I would imagine that LinkedIn is a good platform to start with. What would be some practical recommendations there?
So yeah, definitely LinkedIn. You have things like blogs and stuff like that, where I used to read about what people used to write about what they do. For example, I was once interested in engineering, actually, like in high school, and then I used to read about what that actually means day to day. The universities usually have a lot of careers days that I used to go to as well, where they get different industries or companies to come in, and then they have representatives where you're able to talk to them. So really take advantage of those opportunities. And I guess even if you have like family members that work in those industries, or if they know people that can potentially talk to you. I actually had, after my interview with Shane, a couple of people asked me if I could speak to their children in high school, where they just wanted to ask me questions about that sort of stuff. So yeah, like just
without just brushing over that for a second, because that's quite important. Who's Shane? Can you just explain that to us?
Oh, sorry. So I recently did an interview with Shane Elliott, who's the CEO of ANZ. So that was an awesome opportunity for me. I had no idea that I would be chosen for it, but I was, and I was really nervous. It was very nerve-wracking doing an interview with the CEO, but he was very nice, and I think people, especially in that position, just want to have a chat with other people in their company and about being authentic. I think that's really important. Yeah.
I think just quickly on that as well, with the whole reaching out to people on LinkedIn, a practical, I guess, not hack, but step that you can take, and I didn't really learn until the back end of uni, is to really leverage any mutual aspect of your background that you have with anyone. So that can be, and this is why LinkedIn is such a powerful tool, because if you search for your say your junior school or even your high school name in LinkedIn, and then say filter it via location, for example, or type in your school or your university name and then the company that you're wanting to research, people with that in their bio will come up. And even if it's just a brief message, say, hey, I know you went to my school 10 years ago. That's the mutual connection. And most often people will at least reply to you. So that's a really practical tip that I've certainly used in it's
I didn't even know you could do that, but that's awesome. So I think also every interaction is an opportunity. Even if you have these conversations with someone, you never know, like maybe later down the track, if they know that you're interested in that field, they might come up to you and ask you, hey, like, are you looking for a job? Or so you never know. Always remember that every interaction is an opportunity.
I think that's some fantastic advice, and probably a really great place to sign off on the conversation. So Joumana, thanks a lot for your time this morning. It's been really great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Joumana.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No worries. Bye.